Hello guys, today we have a new special video here. I saw that we were approaching 100 subscribers, so I decided we'll do the fun stuff and make tier lists for the units of the factions. I will say that this is most of the units, but not all of them. I'm missing a lot of like the Navy, hover, air, and a lot of the buildings because I wanted to cover most of the land units. Some units that you'll see commonly, like the unique air units and stuff, unique buildings, right? Just things that you will commonly see as a land player, right? If you're just like a generic frontliner or a generic backliner, these are like the things you would see on like a generic flat, mostly land map. So also additionally, it's like if you were to like compare hover to most units, you would only build hover if you wanted to build hover on like a water map where you wanted to cross over. So it's not like it's exceptionally good. It's more of like a specific purpose you would build these things. Also, like hover between the factions is fairly similar. So a lot of different things between the factions are very similar, and I don't see like a crazy need to rank them. With that being said, this is the second time I'm recording this because I didn't know, but as I put things into the tier list, it actually gets longer vertically, and so half of my video it cut off the tier list. So I'll have to check and see how that looks like as I'm adding these units into the tier list. So I'm going to talk about these units again. So we have the rating here, S through C. I forget, did I have niche here? Or yeah, we had niche here, and then D, and then beyond all reason. So niche is sort of a little worse than C, but not necessarily bad. Like niche and beyond all reason are sort of outside the generic tier list system, but I just put them where they are because it felt like it was necessary. So for example, for a niche building thing is the Twilight from the Armada. It's the invisible cloakable metal extractor. It's niche because it's not C, because C is something that you would be able to generally field just like whenever you want, and it will perform its role. Like it'll just perform, right? It'll be just okay. Niche is more something that like you really need specific circumstances, and you really can't employ them that often. So like the cloakable metal extractor, you don't find that many times that you actually want one because your front line, it's so hard to get an engineer up to the front. Like the enemies can spot it. It's just the number of times you elect to build this is like very, very rare. Similarly, we have the Abductor. I included this because this is a unique Armada unit. We don't really see these guys that much. They're a flying unit with EMP, and they can abduct units to destroy them, I believe. Not necessarily bad, it's just that you generally won't see people building this because it's obviously the air player is going to build it, and so, if they're going air, they might as well go interceptors and bombers, and so it's more niche. It's more of a something that you might see uncommonly. I'm going to put the constructors in the beyond all reason tier. If I were to rank them normally, I would put them all in A tier because constructors are very, very important to your functioning here. Let me see if I can find any more here. Seaplane, I'm going to put, hold on. I don't see any more constructors here. Nah, I don't see any. I think I'm missing I can't find all the constructors. But that's fine. Like when they appear in the list, I'll add them. But basically, the idea is that I will rank the like something like this, Yeah. So the idea is that vehicle and the land constructors are very good. The amphibious is okay. Similarly, like hover is okay. Navy, okay. The air constructors are like, you could consider them the worst because of their primary role as constructors. They have the lowest build power. The caveat is that they have the best, the best mobility, and so they're very useful for getting around to places that are hard to reach. The tier 2 constructor, notably, is very good for building like long-range artillery on cliffs, on like high cliffs, and so they're actually very useful for that. And like Ragnaroks, you'll see them swarming for Ragnaroks. If the like air player or the high economy player has them, he'll just use those and get the Ragnarok up there. I wanted to say that in terms of like vehicle versus bot constructor, there are pros and cons to each. The vehicle constructor has to like when you're moving it, it has to like sort of rotate around like a tank sort of. So it's not like as ideal as a builder or nice and quality of life as the bot builder, so the bot builders are a little nice to have. In terms of which is better for the faction, bots versus vehicles, they're very, very like comparable in their like power level. So bots versus vehicles for the Armada is very comparable, I would say. I have the bots listed as slightly higher, but it's up to preference. My preference is vehicles, but it is what it is. Construction vehicle, yeah, it's just a constructor. All right, next we have the Ambassador, which is a stealth missile truck, I think. Stealthy missile truck. It's just like a long range. It shoots a missile and it takes a long time to reload. It's okay. It's just it's very expensive. It's hard to micro. You just gotta pay attention to these guys. And its DPS is just okay. So whenever you feel them, they're just okay. It's just like you're usually stressed out and building other things to shore up your other like areas of importance. Ooh, I forgot to mention the construction seaplane. It actually goes to the top because even though you might not build this as like your land player on certain maps where there's water, if you become the player that's designated or like volunteers to build the seaplanes, like the seaplanes are very good. There's like a reason I put it up here is because like the seaplane gunship is like the best. It's very good. It's a very dangerous strategy if you were to go up against seaplanes. Like, yeah, I've seen a lot of games fall apart because we just get destroyed by seaplane gunships. Happens all the time. That's why they're at the top here. Next, we have the T2 bot anti-air. These guys are just kind of bad. Like all the anti-air bots or vehicles, not vehicles. All the anti-air bots are just bad. In my opinion, like you much rather get the anti-air flak. That thing is like infinitely better. In like 99% of the situations, you would only build the like anti-air bots if you're like super desperate and you need the anti-air right now. Like yeah, it's like a last resort. So you really wouldn't want to build these. Next, we have the Blitz, which I am going to put into the S tier. The Blitz is like one of my favorite units. Is a light tank from T1 light tank. It is super fast. It can end games in the early mid game. You either like just swarm and get a ball of them and send them into the backline, just run by. Very strong. I'm putting them in S tier. We have the Bull, which I am putting at the like a high A tier. It is very versatile. It has good HP, decent range. It outranges the enemy Tiger, or the Cortex Tiger, which is the equivalent tank. It outranges. It has AoE on its shots. Decent health, decent damage. Like its speed is a little slow, but that's fine. And the one like negative is its cost. So it's a very versatile unit. When you feel them, it always feels good. In the late game, they fall off just a little bit, but they still do okay against T3. Not terrible, but just okay. Next, we have the Centurion, which I will put, since this is the second time I'm recording it, I decided I'll put it in the C tier, lowest C tier, because I put it in the niche category because the problem with Centurions is that they are really, really good at destroying T1 swarms of like the medium plasma bots and the grunts and stuff, like the fast infantry, but they just sort of are terrible at like anything else. So I was like putting them at the top of niche tier, but if you were to build them, they're not necessarily bad, they'll just do okay. So similar to the Ambassador here, like they'll just do okay, I guess. But their main problems are they don't have enough range, their speed is horrible, and their cost is high for their tier of T1. They do destroy tier 1 really good, but if you immediately lose to any tier 2 units that come out, just like immediately lose. So I just put them at the bottom of the C tier, not so great. Next we have the T2 combat engineer from the bot factory. It's the butler. It's okay, it's a combat engineer. It's not too crazy like the Cortex one, which can build fiends, I believe. So this one is just okay. It does its job, it's very balanced. Combat engineers are nice because they're like engineers but fast. And they have a lot of build power on them. So, you know, they're just a little expensive and you might not need to build them all the time. So just B tier with them. Oh, I forgot to mention the funny stuff, the Beyond All Reason tier and the Commander. I should have done the Commander first. Commander is the most important guy in your game. He gives you income, he can degun and immediately destroy buildings and units, like super strong. You can fly him in at the early game with a transport and just eviscerate a base in a funny meme strat. Very powerful. The game revolves around him, and so he's S tier. Next, we have the Beyond All Reason tier, which is I'm going to put the Decoy Commander and the Decoy... Actually, no, just the Decoy Commander for now. I will put the Decoy... Oh, shoot. Shoot. Here we go. Okay, the decoy commander goes there in the beyond all reason tier. If you're dead set on building this guy, you are beyond all reason. That's why he's there. He's a very funny guy. He could be very good, but I've just never seen it really pull off anything valuable. But in theory, it could be a very valuable thing. On the other hand, actually, I forgot where I put this guy the last time, but I'm putting this in like actually the B- tier because it's actually really funny. If you were, oh wait, this is the wrong one. I'm sorry. Where is it? Where did it go? The decoy. Yeah, there we go. The decoy. That's the one I wanted to talk about. The decoy. The decoy fusion reactor is really funny. And in theory, if you actually get an enemy bomber player to like attack this instead of your actual reactors, like insane value. And for that reason, I'm putting the cloakable reactor next to it because like these things will pair up. Like imagine if you build one of these decoys and then one of these, and you just like trick the bomber player into destroying your decoy. Like, oh my god, so funny and so much value because you will like stop the damage of the bombers. Like very funny, very funny. I'm also putting the console, the T2 vehicle. What is it called? T2 vehicle combat engineer in like. I feel like it could go A- tier. You can do this interesting strat where you build the console from the T2 vehicle factory and then reclaim your T2 factory and then start building T2 bots, which are the hounds from the console, which is why they're really good. Very similar to the Cortex ability to build fiends from their combat engineer. And so the console is like quite the best combat engineer for the Armada here. Crossbow is the T1 anti-air bot. Same deal. You want flak. So much better to deal with anti-air. To deal with air units. We have the Fat Boy, which I am going to put at the top of B tier for now. It's a good unit, solid unit. It's got good range, good damage, good AoE. The problems are it's expensive and slow, and it tends to hit your own units with its AoE, so a little bit of an issue with that. But it's not a bad unit to see, so that's why it's a B tier unit here. On the other hand, we have the Ghost, which is an A tier unit. I will probably edit these. I forgot to mention the left side is better than the right side within the tier. Just saying. The Ghost is very good. It's a cloaked spy bot. You cloak it to get information. That's like its first use. But the second use, which is very good, is the ability to self-destruct to cause an EMP, which stuns enemy units. It's very, very, very good because the EMP is quite large and it can really, really change the course of like certain engagements, which is why it's A ranked here. It is, I would say, better than a console. The caveats to this is that it needs micro, and you need to like pay attention to them, and they're kind of expensive, right? And they cost energy and stuff. So there's like costs to field them, but they are very good for what they do, and so they go to A tier. Similarly, we have the Gremlin, which I would say is a little better than the Cloakable. Actually, maybe a little. I'll just put it right here. Okay, the Gremlin is a cloaked stealth tank. If you field like 15-ish to 20 of these guys, depending on how many, 15-ish about, you can try to sneak them in to destroy reactors, which is a very, very powerful ability to have a cloaked unit that can attack. It is, you can consider it as the niche tier because it only has one use basically, but that use is so good, and that's why I'm putting it into the B tier here. Like the ability to destroy reactors, it's a game-ending strategy on its own, so that's why it's very good. We have the Gunslinger, which I'm putting at the bottom of like C tier here. Like this thing, it's a T2 unit that can only really deal with T1 and nothing else pretty much. It's got too little speed and range to deal with T2, the T2 meta, which is like the longer range units. So it really struggles. It's just got not enough HP. It's just not enough. And so it goes to C tier, bottom of C tier here. We have the Hound, which is a tier unit, and I am putting it. Is it more useful than the Ghost? Yeah, I would say the Dog is very useful as a. I call this the Dog, the Hound. It's a T2 motor bot that has good range. It has two weapons. You can swap it to a Gauss cannon, which has much more direct fire, much faster. So the default weapon is a like slow-moving AoE projectile. So you change it to the Gauss cannon, which is much faster and does only direct damage and no AoE. And so it is quite versatile. You can use it to gap close as well at times against certain units that are like more meta, like the Sheldon. You can try to rush down Sheldons. Like, very versatile unit. You just have to pay attention to them, and very solid. And that's why they go into A tier. We have the Janus, which will go to the top of the B tier for now. Janus is a T1 missile vehicle that is hard to micro, kind of expensive, but when you use them, they are quite a menace. They're similar to like rocket bots, but they're much more alpha strike damage. So like instant first damage and then run away kind of deal. And so they're very, very good, very deadly. You just have to sort of commit to their strategy a little bit and watch out for rush downs because they're vulnerable to getting rushed down. All right, we have the Jaguar, which I will put at here, right here. Above the Butler. The Jaguar is a lightning tank. It's very similar to the Hound in its role as a stopgap unit. So if you're teching, say, and you need units on the field right now because your team is being pressured, the Hound and the Jaguar serve a similar function where they are like a very cheap but effective T2 unit that you can field quite quickly. And they're very good at what they do as a stopgap unit. The Jaguar, however, is sort of bad later on, the longer the game goes on. The Dog is also bad the longer the game goes on, but the Dog doesn't go as bad as quickly because the Jaguar has much lower range. Individually, it's pretty bad, but if you field them in like small groups of at least like 2 or 3, they become very good because they can start one-shotting the T1 units, and they like alpha striking them basically. All 3 of them fire at this one unit, and then disappears. That's the kind of the idea of it. They're very good as a stopgap unit, and the secondary or other role as a breakthrough unit to get into the background line and do harassment. Very good at that. The problem is it's just like it really only has that sort of role, whereas the Hound is more versatile. Like the Jaguar is kind of less versatile, and so I'm putting it in a B tier. The Lazarus, the Res bot, the Reclaim bot, is very good, S tier. All the pros use it. Reclaim, Resurrect, very good. You will always want to use these in your games. S tier with it right next to the commander. Anyway, we have a unique air unit for the Armada, which is the Leash. Leash, I think it's called. It's the atomic bomber, basically. I will put it here for now. Very good. It's a game ender. Expensive, but it's very powerful. You can destroy reactors with it. So it's a game ender on its own. You can also use it to attack enemy armies. It's got a huge AoE, very high damage, very important. The enemies will always try to take this out as soon as they see it. And so it's a very powerful unit, and so I put it at the A tier. Mace is sort of a unit that you will just tend to build no matter what game you're playing. Because you will usually swap out, if you're going bots, swap out of your fast infantry bots to go to these medium tier bots. They're just a solid unit that you will use. Very good for the the T1 phase. I think probably the best T1 unit that you can have usually. Not necessarily, because we'll talk about some other guys. But it's a very solid unit. Good range. It's just a little slow. Its cost is high, but not too high. So it's like very good, very good. Marauder, S tier. Above the Blitz. This guy is just so ubiquitous. He is the meta. He is the T3 unit, the fast T3 unit with good range, okay damage. He's got anti-air. He can go into the water. He's amphibious. You'll see him on Supreme Straight a lot of the time. He's a game ender. He rushes into the backline and destroys reactors. He is a top tier unit, very good. Even in like front battles, he's not terrible because if you micro him, he can kite really well. Like, very good. Marauder, very good. You'll see him all the time in my videos, basically. We'll have next the Mauser, which is one of my favorite units. The T2 vehicle artillery is very good. It's a little slow, and you have to get used to its turn rate and stuff. But when you use it, it's very good. It can counter or combat, not counter, combat a lot of the problem units like the Sheldon and the snipers. And it's fairly cost effective for its price. So only about 300 mass or metal, and its damage and range are quite good. And it's very a solid unit. You can actually fight snipers and Sheldons. Like you'll trade with them and combat them. And for its price, it's very cost effective at fighting both of them. You just need the right support units, which are the radar and the radar and jammer bots. You just need them. So I'm putting all the radar and jammer bots in the same area here if I can find them. Yeah, the radar and jammer bots, just very important A tier support units that you will tend to build in most of your games here. There should be one more, but I can't find it right now. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there should be one more. Where is it? Starlight. No, 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 no. Oh, this one. This one. Yeah, the vehicle one looks kind of strange. Yeah. Yeah, the vehicle one, yeah, all these support radar and jammer units are very important to your offensive moves, very important, actually defensive too against Sheldons and snipers, very important to have jammers and stuff, very good, very good. Next we have the Groundhog, which is a minesweeper, or like it lays mines and stuff. It's super niche, mines are just okay, they're very micro intensive if you want to use them, and so it's just niche, you might not want to build them all the time, it's very, very seldom, like, it's cool to see, not necessarily the best strategy. Technically, I think it is like cost efficient if your mines do connect to enemy units. Technically, it's efficient, but very intensive and annoying to micro and stuff. We also have the Paralyzer, which is a defensive structure that the Armada has. It's unique to the Armada. It's a like tactical missile that you can fire that takes up to around 10 seconds for the missile to connect from when you give the order, and the missile just stuns things in the area. It's a decent defensive structure. It costs mass to field as well, like to build the missiles and stuff. So I'm putting it into the C tier. It's a defensive structure, basically, unique to the Armada, and that's why I included it into this tier list too. Next, we have the Pawn. I put it in the top of B tier last time, but I will put it into the bottom of A tier this time. I said that in my first recording that the Pawn is sort of like, it's outclassed by the Tick, but that's not necessarily true. The Tick goes to the S tier. I'll explain that next. But the Pawn has its uses in so many different areas. It has its counters, and that's why it goes into like the low A tier, or I just say right next to the Mace. I don't know. It's a little debatable where you would put these, because like the comparable unit from the Cortex is a little better than the Pawn, just a little bit. Excuse me. The Pawn has less attack. excuse me. The Pawn has less attack range, but more DPS than the Grunt. It's only about the same speed, so it actually struggles to fight against the Grunt if you're microing both units perfectly here. It actually struggles. But in Massive Swarms, the Pawn doesn't do that bad, actually. Similarly to how the Grunt in Massive Swarms doesn't do that bad. In like the T1 phase, it's your first unit that you'll usually produce, your fast infantry bot. So it's like very, very important to build. You'll build it. That's why it's A tier. In like the middle game, if you make swarms of them, like in a ball, they can potentially run into the backline, similarly to how a blitz works. In the late game, like you can still swarm them and still get decent trades and like destroy stuff. They're just countered by AoE like very heavily, and so they have their uses, but they're not like perfect. And that's why they're here. I wanted to talk about the Tick, which is the S tier, because the best scout and best swarmer late game. Like you use these to draw fire from like missiles and stuff, lasers, like slow reload motor units and stuff. These things are very good for deflecting your attacks from your more important units, and just like baiting enemy units into attacking Ticks instead of the units you really want to keep alive. And so a common thing is called Tick spam. Very, very good. You can Tick spam with Pawns. It's just technically better to do it with the Ticks, and I think the Ticks do it better. They're honestly the best scout unit as well. Like a single Tick can make the game in your favor, and that's why they're in S tier. Are they better than a Blitz? I would actually say yes. And they're actually more ubiquitous than a Marauder, so they actually go up to here. Like very good. I'm putting these amphibious units into the bottom of C tier because they are what they are. You wouldn't necessarily build them unless you have water, and so they do their job. Yeah, you would only build these if there's like water you need to cross. So I put them in the bottom of the C tier. They do their job. Okay, they're necessary, but they do their job. Next, we have a unique structure from the what do you call it? The Armada. It's called the Prude. It's a T2 geothermal vent that is very, very useful and unique to them. It's called the Prude. The name got cut off here a little bit, but the point is it produces less energy than a T2 geothermal vent, but it makes like pretty much a very small explosion when it's destroyed. It's very useful in PvP because like geothermal vents are big targets, and you really don't want to deal with the explosions of them. Sometimes you can just build a T2 geothermal vent if you're greedy and stuff, but the Prude is very useful, especially on maps like Forge, where there's like 5 geothermal vents next to each other, and you just if you have Prudes on them, like, you're not going to get absolutely crippled. You're still crippled because you like lost like a geothermal vent, but like the explosion won't take out your base on like the bottom of Forge, and that's why they're very good, very good. The Armada's one is very useful. The Cortex one's also very useful, but in a different sense, I guess. Next, we have the Razorback, which I will only put at the top of C tier here. The Razorback, in my opinion, is not a great T3 compared to the Marauder, just because I don't see in either my replays or the game I've played, I don't see the Razorback ever like ending a game, usually. The Razorback suffers from the fact that its speed is just not enough, its range is not enough, and because its range is very low, you have to micro them and you have to pay attention to them. They're much more expensive than a Marauder, and they mass donate to the enemy very hard if you attack them. Usually they're pretty good on defense, but like other than that, I don't see them ending games like on their own. And their HP isn't that great, all things considered. Like if they get focused by like an enemy army, like they're toast. Like donate a mass. So I'd never see them doing all too much, but they are a T3 unit that does decent damage, very good damage, and they can hit air, very good damage, but it's got a lot of issues, so I put it at C tier. Next we have the Recluse, which I will put at the C tier, just right below the Jaguar this time. The Recluse can be used on open fields, although you probably shouldn't because it is outclassed, but it will be able to trade against some enemies. The Recluse is more used for climbing up cliffs and surprise attacking that way, and so it's very useful in that manner. I wanted to add the Weber, which is a similar unit paired with it. I'm going to put it at the bottom of C tier because it's actually a little redundant to the the Janus, and it's more expensive. The Weber is like a support unit that has an EMP weapon that it can use to stun targets, and it can also reclaim stuff, but not resurrect. So it can also climb anywhere, so that's what it's mainly used for. But you would generally just use the Lazarus instead of the Weber, so you won't see the Weber all that often. Yeah, it's just the game says that a Recluse Weber surprise attack is very good, but the situations where you do that are very slim, and it's kind of hard to pull off. Next, we have the Rocketeer, which is, I will put it at the bottom of S tier here. The Rocketeer is a very, very important unit. Very good. You'll see this in pretty much every game. For the bots, it's their only at T1 phase. It's the only anti-turret option for the bots, and like it is just so good. Like you swarm these guys T1 phase. These guys determine the state of the game in like the front line in the T1 phase. So very, very good. Similarly, I'm going to skip and do the Shell Shocker, and I'm going to put him actually like just above the tick, actually. I think the Shell Shocker, like the T1 vehicle artillery is so good for the front line. It is so good. It is like, it beats the Rocketeer in like equal numbers and stuff. If they were to trade and just F command, like fight command into each other, the Shell Shockers should win. Shell Shockers, you need to get used to their like movement because they are vehicles, but they're just so important in the front line turret, like the front line. Like they are so good at the T1 phase, so important that I put them at like the third unit here for now. Like they're so good. They serve the same role as Rocketeers, but they are very good. Next we have the Rover, which I would just put at like the bottom of B tier or A tier because I mean they're outclassed by the Tick, but as a vehicle equivalent, they're not like terrible. They're a scout unit. They serve their role. They win trades against Ticks technically because they have more HP and damage. But you rather just have the Tick. The Tick just does the job better in terms of the late game spam and stuff. So as an early game scout unit, it's here, but like late game, you're gonna use the Tick for the spam and stuff. Next, we have the Sharpshooter, which I will put. Now, it depends on what you think. You can put it into the S tier, like somewhere in the S tier, or top of A tier for sure. Like the Sharpshooter is just a very, very good unit. But my problem with the Sharpshooter is that it's very vulnerable and it has its counters. Like I said, the Mauser can fight the sharpshooter. It's the same thing with the Cortex T2 vehicle. What do you call it? T2 vehicle artillery can fight the sharpshooter, assuming the support units are non-factor or equal. They can fight. I just think the sharpshooter is you can deal with the sharpshooter. It's almost unstoppable, but you can deal with it. And so I'm putting it at the top of A tier. If you have trouble with sharpshooters, like fighting against them, then yeah, they would go into the S tier for you. Next, we have sprinters. I mean, like I wanted to say, like they're vulnerable to getting jumped. You have to play around the sharpshooters, and that's why you have to use the wielders, which I will put at the top of B tier. The wielder is like the perfect combo for sharpshooters. You see that happening all the time. They come from the same factory, and that's why you would do it. The wielders have no speed, basically, no range. They have good attack damage and very good bulk. They deal with spam, T1 spam, like swarming units very well. Their problems are that they don't have range, which is why they're a complement to the sharpshooter. And the sharpshooters don't have HP, and that's why they're a complement to the wielder. And so they pair together. But wielders on their own won't win games. Sharpshooters can, and so they're a higher tier. But sharpshooters are even better with the wielder. Like the wielder sharpshooter support unit combo is probably like S tier. If you get all three units together, the combo is like S tier. But alone, it's A tier. Like you have to consider like how it's used, I guess. I don't know. All right, next we have the sprinter, which I will put at the bottom of C tier. The sprinter sucks. Not gonna lie, sprinter really sucks, man. Maybe I maybe I even put it in the D tier, like or niche. Like it is no bueno, no bueno. I'm gonna say niche. Actually, I've seen times where sprinters do stuff, so I'm gonna put sprinters in C tier. They're sort of like a faster pawn with a little more HP, and that's just about it. And they're really expensive. So like compared to a fiend, sprinters just don't do enough. They're more for breakthroughs and then harassment into the backline. They're very good at that, but everything else they kind of suck. They have to really get surrounds when they're fighting enemy units, and so they're kind of hard to use. So bottom of C tier with them. Next, we have the Starlight, which I am going to put below the leash. Starlight can end games, but it's just a little harder to use, a little more risky. It's very similar to the sharpshooter. Maybe I should move them up to the. Yeah, I'll move them. No, I think this guy deserves his spot right here. Starlight has its issues, which is it's slow. It's a big target. It's expensive, mass expensive. Sharpshooters are energy expensive, but Starlights are mass expensive, and mass is the more important resource, and so they're kind of more difficult to use here. Yeah, definitely more useful. They're still very useful. They also require energy to fire, just like the sharpshooter. So I'm putting them lower than the sharpshooter. But as part of the vehicle, like factory's toolkit, they're very useful, and so they go into the A tier. They're very good for slow pushing. They have very, very good range. I think they outrange sharpshooters, so they can fight sharpshooters, and that's why they're very good. The the T1 air transport is a very good unit, and I'm telling you here to not forget about it because. It is very good, and I'm putting it in here just so you can remember. Very good. It combos with your engineers as well as your commander. You can use it in that early game strategy, like I said. A very good unit. Even if you're like a land player, you might even build it. Like it's just very useful. Generally, though, you'll get it from your air player if you want to do a strat with them. Next, we have the Stout, which I believe is actually better than like the support units. Actually. The Stout is just a great T1 tank. You'll build your T1 light tanks, and then you'll switch into the Stouts, your medium tanks. Like very good unit. I think Stouts are a little better than the medium tier plasma bots because Stouts have like more speed, and sometimes you can do run-bys with them. So that makes them more useful and more versatile. Very nice to have. Very good unit. Next, we have the Shredder, which is S tier, easy. The AntiAir flak is the best unit you could have besides the base AntiAir flak. Like this is the flak you would build. This is the AntiAir unit you would build. S tier with that. Next we have the Thor, which I don't particularly like to use or see. It has its role as a like anti-spam unit, so I'm gonna put it like about here. I'm gonna put it like it's somewhere in this area here. Somewhere in this area here. I think the Jaguar beats it, in my opinion, because the Thor is very hard to build. It's a super expensive T3. Its damage is good, but its range is kind of poor, and it really only deals with spam units and like many units. If you're fighting other T3s, it's gonna not do so great. It's gonna do just okay. If you're fighting static defense, it actually kind of struggles because it doesn't have enough like range, and it's very slow. So to get close, it has to gap close, and then it takes so much damage, and then if it gets attacked again, you just mass donate. So it's got problems here, man. Problems. But it's definitely got a niche in dealing with spam, which is why it's better than a razorback. It also has like a secondary weapon, which is like an EMP, similar to the what do you call it? The paralyzer structure that I added into here, which I put into C tier. It also has the paralyzer kind of built into it, so it's okay with that. This is a nice thing to have. Next, we have the Thor or Titan, which is I'm gonna put it like. Titan is very, very important. I'm going to put it right here, above the Tick and the Marauder. The Titan is like very similar to how important the T1 artillery is in its time frame. In the late game time frame, the Titan is the most important unit for the Armada arsenal. There's nothing else like it that can fill its role as a big mobile fortress. Basically, it's the only thing Armada has, and that's why it's very important to have it. They don't have EMP resistance though, and so you have to be wary of them. I would recommend bringing flak, like support units with the Titan. Support units, flak, anti-air, air coverage, like the Titans should be supported, as well as you can bring multiple Titans as opposed to Cortex, where they generally have to just run in the one Juggernaut because of the cost difference. Titans will lose 1-to-1 versus a Juggernaut, but you should be able to field multiple Titans, and that way you can try to beat the Cortex Juggernaut, which is the equivalent. Both of them are very good units, so Juggernauts and Titans. Which one's better? It's up to your preference. Cortex, obviously, bigger, stronger, more expensive. But you know, there's the argument that the costs and the numbers make up the difference, and the ability to have it onto the field faster because of its cost. That's another factor. So it's very good for the Armada tier list. Compared to the Cortex, it's debatable which one is better. The Cortex Juggernaut is immune to stuns, though, so another thing to consider. We have the Tumbleweed, which is a mobile self-destructing bomb that can cloak, I believe, and I'm putting it in the top of B tier because this thing is slept on. It was very good. It's similar to the Gremlin, but there's like kind of better in a way because you just sort of not have to like pay attention so much, not as vulnerable. You only need a couple of them to get like a reactor destroyed, and so top of B tier to make a statement that these guys are slept on. We have what, this like amphibious tank. It is what it is. It's not, it does its job, and that's why it's C tier. It's such a job as an amphibious tank. All right, we have the Umbrella, which is a mobile anti-nuke unit, and because it's very sneaky, and it's technically better than a base anti-nuke because it can move around and be sneaky with it. So I'm putting it in the niche tier. You generally won't build them because you'll just build the base anti-nuke one, or your allies will build your base anti-nuke. But these are, they serve a role, and so they're niche. They serve a role. If you like using them, then you use them, and they're niche for you. You would use them because this is your niche you like. Next, we have the Vanguard, which I will put just above the Fat Boy. The Vanguard is similar to the Cortex's Catapult or Cataphract. I forget what it's called. I think it's Catapult. The Cortex Catapult is really good. When you want to build a long-range long-range artillery unit, generally it's because there's a lot of stuff far away that you want to destroy a lot of, and so that's why the area of effect of the catapult is better, just because of how much damage it does over a large area, and so that's why I think the Cortex one would go into A tier, but the Armada one isn't bad necessarily. It does its job as a long-range artillery unit that you can move around, and so it's a B tier unit here. It does its job good. It's very balanced. Okay, let me just check that the video is going correctly here and the tier list is being captured. All right, lastly, we have the Missile Truck, which is the vehicle version of the Rocketeer, and I will only put this at, I will put it at somewhere in B tier here, probably just below the Janus, actually. Compared to the Rocketeer, it's much harder to use. The Whistler turns very slowly, and so if you're actually trying to kite with them, it's harder to do than the Rocketeer. The Whistler does have more range than the Rocketeer, but its ability to run away and kite is less, so it's harder to use, it's harder to micro. You really have to commit to the Whistler strategy, sort of like the Janus if you were to use them. Like, you really need a lot of Whistlers, because one missile truck does basically nothing. Like, it's got no damage, dude. No damage. So you need a horde of them, and so you have to commit to the strategy. The strategy can work really well. It's just a little difficult. Like, it's easier to pull off the strategy with Rocketeers, and that's why I'm putting them into the B tier here. All right. So I believe that's the tier list here that I've made. Beyond All Reason is not necessarily bad, except maybe the Decoy Commander. Wasn't there something else that I was supposed to put into the Beyond All Reason category? I don't know, but I put the Engineers here. The Engineers are all A tier, actually, but I'm just putting here for the sake of making a more aesthetic tier list here. D tier units, you probably shouldn't build these. You probably shouldn't build these, okay? But everything else, S, A, and B, you will tend to see that in your game, and you'll tend to build them. C tier, you might see like the Razorback, but I would say like these units are not so great. Like, instead of building like, what do you call it, ambassadors, you might want to build sharpshooters, like that kind of deal. Instead of like paralyzers, you might want like pulsars or something. It's just like, there are other options that will generally do like similar roles or do better, and so that's why you'll see S, A, and B in most of your games. Or like the S, A, and B units generally perform pretty well, in my opinion. This is a subjective tier list, and so it's objectively the best tier list because it is made by me, the Messiah, the God King, the all-knowing one, the omniscient one. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the tier list that is most definitely objectively correct. Yep. Totally a objectively correct subjective tier list or whatever. So do what you will with this tier list. Not all units are included, like I said, like Navy units, air, and hover are kind of similar between the factions, and they do their job. If I were to put like bombers and stuff, they would go into A tier because of their role as game enders. Other things like the construction unit turrets, that they have in place, they would go into like A tier. Defensive turrets, like static defenses, all depends on what the player thinks of static defense, because different players have different strategies. So a player that incorporates static defenses might put him in S or A. Others that are more aggressive might put him in B or C. Like, it is what it is. Like, so I can't really attest to them that much, but these are the like units that I'm more familiar with, and so I put them in a list of based on how I see them as threatening or not, or how important they are. All right, thanks for watching, and thanks for the 100 subs. That's why I decided to make this video, I guess. And I will probably make the Cortex one at some point and release it when we get to that number. All right, thanks for watching, and goodbye.